Hi everyone, this is Tim Martin, and this is my final project for Global Business Management, and I'll be discussing the introduction of change management, intellectual property, and related services in India. There'll be 7 parts of this presentation. Section 1, I will overview change management, the service that will be offered. There'll be a country analysis in Section 2. Section 3, risk assessment. 4, cultural analysis. 5, the business plan. 6, identify the labor market, and 7, I will discuss the strategy that will be proposed for the selected partner. So what's change management and why is it important? Well, change management services and intellectual property are methodologies that are designed to help a company leverage its corporate structure to lead individual employees through change. And this change could be anything like a strategic change or a new project initiative, maybe a new piece of software. Throughout this presentation, I'll be discussing primarily training services in India, and these are US developed training services from the parent company. So why is change management important, and what's the value prop? Well, change management can help any sort of project or initiative essentially get the complete value of that project through the process of reducing and eliminating resistance to change. So in this example, this is Salesforce, a CRM software. If we have resistance from marketing to adopt this this program, then we can see a breaking in the chain of the effectiveness of Salesforce. And that's why it's important to minimize this resistance and help companies to adapt more quickly and get more out of their projects and initiatives. This is important as well because every company deals with it on a global scale, that every company deals with projects, initiatives, strategic shifts, and they'll be dealing with this more so as the global landscape becomes more competitive and more turbulent. Resistance to change can cause higher employee turnover, employee sabotage, even a loss of trust in leadership, among other consequences, and it's important to limit this resistance through the change management process. And the primary benefit to the customer that we'll be discussing is an increase in competitive advantage and operational agility. So the ability to adapt to changes more quickly and in a better fashion will help companies to be more agile as they move through this turbulent environment. So why India? What's the big picture about India? India's got the population growth that is necessary in order to produce a high rate of return. We've got company growth, we've got consistent GDP growth, and return on foreign direct investment has a positive trend, and India is going from a developing nation to a developed nation. Right here, we can see the growth potential of India. Over the past 5 years, GDP growth has averaged 7.42%, right down here in the heat index, and this is second only to China. However, China has been known to not respect intellectual property rights, and therefore China was not considered a viable option. We've seen a manageable credit rating, as India is an investment grade, has an investment grade credit rating, and their FDI confidence index has shown that India has improved over the last several years. Again, population continues to grow. They're expected to surpass China by 2020, and they've got a robust GDP sector consisting of agriculture, industry, and service. We expect this to shift to more services as most developed nations become more service-oriented, and this will again increase the need for change management services. Growth in foreign direct investment has continually increased in India, which shows that companies have a high confidence in the Indian market and are willing to take the risk in entering India for the expected return. So we view India as a green light for go, based on its manageable risk and its growing competitive environment and the need for every company in India to have change management services. So there's 4 primary risks that are of concern when delivering change management services in India. These are cultural, political, economic, and legal. And the big picture of this is that these risks are considered manageable in entering India based on the high rate of expected return. Politically, India has been improving over the last 5 years. The corruption perception index, as seen in the chart on the top right, shows that India has improved year over year in the corruption perception index, and they are relatively politically free based on freedomhouse.org. They are considered mostly unfree economically. However, the high rate of return and the expected future environment in India create an environment that's conducive to continuing to develop services in India. The primary legal risk that we'll face is that India is under a common law system, and this differs from a civil law system in that a common law system will rely more heavily on the contract being laid out very specifically in order to make sure that we protect our intellectual property. So in drafting this agreement for licensing out the intellectual property, we'll need to be very careful about the actual language that is used in it and that it's very clearly laid out. All this really translates to is higher legal expenses in order to protect ourselves and the IP. So the biggest issue here in delivering change management services comes from cultural differences. First important cultural difference is the caste system. The system has been abolished, but it's not forgotten in India. It has significant influence on businesses. Managers are typically of a higher caste than their lower level employees. And this means that we'll need to adapt these training services culturally to fit the caste system, because we in the United States, and where the change management IP has been developed, don't typically deal with anything like the caste system. Languages in India are also very robust. There is a heterogeneous split of languages in India, as seen in the chart to the right at the top. As compared to the United States is a very homogeneous market, and each language in India typically has a different region that's associated with it being spoken. And so this creates an important need to regionally adapt the change management services in order to fit the different languages and cultures of India. This map shows, again, the language barrier, or the language regions in India, and it's very diverse as compared to the United States, which is primarily English speaking. So in India, we'll need to have a very specific regional approach to meet the needs of these different cultures. Education is also improving in India, which shows another reason why change management will be likely accepted in India. The government has been increasing its investment in education, and private businesses have as well. And we can see this through the literacy rate continually improving in India, and that's shown in the chart to the right. Culturally, from a business standpoint, there are 4 primary differences that India has when compared to the United States. These are power distance, individualism, long-term versus short-term orientation, and indulgence. India has much higher power distance, which shows that they have there's a bigger distance between leadership and lower-level workers. They're a more collectivist state, and they're very much a longer-term oriented culture. The workforce is highly masculine, as seen in the chart to the right. India has the highest variance between men and women working in the labor force. Women are under 30%. Under 30% of women in India participate in the labor force, while over 80% of men do. And this is the greatest among all countries that have been studied for this presentation. So really, the importance of this cultural analysis is to highlight the complexity and the differences from the U.S. culture to the Indian culture, particularly as they relate to change management services and courses that are intended to deliver change management to companies in India. We need to have an adapted approach that translates the change management materials regionally, and we need culturally relevant delivery of services. So this will require somebody that's uniquely qualified to understand the Indian marketplace. On to the business plan. The primary considerations of this plan are the age of change management in India, which is very young, differentiation of the change management IP. We want to be a differentiated company, and we need to have this flexible, adaptive approach as mentioned previously. Additionally, the product is to be priced at a premium, but the premium pricing needs to be sensitive to the purchasing power parity of India. So that will be a high consideration in the business strategy. So in order to adapt to the cultural needs, we will be utilizing a localization strategy. There's several pros of this strategy in order to help us regionally adapt to the Indian marketplace. It has a high focus on cultural considerations. We don't need to mass produce the change management service, and it's congruent with the incremental approach that we want for the regions as we enter the Indian marketplace. The target consumer for the sale of change management IP will be large companies and multinational companies operating in India, and we'll be targeting their senior leadership in order to deliver these services that can help them increase their competitive advantage. We'll use local resources for translating the materials, and as we'll get into in just a moment here, we'll utilize authorized training providers or licensees in order to deliver the services. These could be local consulting houses or training companies, something of that sort in India. Again, the mode of entry is a licensing strategy. The reason for this is it's low risk. There's a low capital investment required. We can adapt to the different cultures through this by utilizing a licensee who has a unique understanding of the Indian culture, and we can ensure that there are legal protections over the IP as long as we draft our licensing agreement well. This will give us a fast expected return on investment with low overall investment monetarily. And we can allow any licensee to translate the materials for the regional considerations. So the plan is to identify the partner, draft the licensing agreement, build the framework for success through coaching the partner, and then go ahead and audit and monitor the partner's delivery of change management services. In identifying the labor market, there were 4 primary countries that were explored: the United Kingdom, Singapore, Australia, and India. The major considerations are cost of labor, availability of executive level talent, education levels, the proximity to India, the Indian market, and travel costs. Importantly, what we found is that paying an executive level employee in India comes at a fraction of the cost of that in the 4 other countries that were analyzed. Average earnings per education showed that there's a likely far lower cost for Indian talent, and this was backed up by the executive director salary by country via payscale.com, which showed that India is at a fraction of the cost of the other countries in question. Education in India is also has very positive outlook, which shows that we'll likely be able to obtain and increasingly obtain the executive level talent that we need as India continues to push for higher level education and more skilled workers. As we look at the distance from each of the countries to India, we find that each one is several thousand miles away, and maxing out with Australia at over 6,000 miles away. Importantly, this distance to India indicates that there will be high travel costs associated with sending training teams if the partner is located in Singapore, Australia, or the United Kingdom. These travel costs are passed on directly to clients and therefore can erode the ability to charge a premium pricing in India and also retain high profit margins. Therefore, India has become the likely choice. There's a lower cost of living in India. Per the chart up at top, we can see that India is actually a fraction of the cost of living of each of the different countries in question, and we're able to obtain a high level of talent at a lower cost in India and pay ethical wages to these Indian employees that can be consistent with the marketplace. So on to the final part of this presentation, HR strategy and the plan for the partner. We'll take a polycentric-like approach, although we'll be using a licensee, so it won't be a true polycentric approach, but we will have a authorized training provider or a licensee in India, and we'll help that partner build a success for their HR framework in order to attract and retain the correct level of talent. So our target employee for this would be instructors for courses, and these would be because the target customer are senior level leadership at companies, we're looking for executive level talent or equivalent. So there will be a high level of education required. And the goal, again, is to develop an appropriate wage range and make recommendations based on the U.S. pay of executives, U.S. executive benefits, Indian executive pay, cost of living adjustments, and the bonus requirements for executives. As we can see here, the U.S. executives at a mid-tier range earn approximately $172,000 annually, and when adjusted for purchasing power parity through the Economist Big Mac Index, which is simply a very simplified way of adjusting for purchasing power parity, we get about $84,000 or $85,000 comparable salary for the Indian executive. But per payscale.com, Indian executives with 20 plus years of experience earn an average salary of about $55,000, which means that we can recommend a salary of $55,000 to $85,000 for our partner. Health insurance is also not universal in India, so this will be required in order to retain the talent and keep the talent healthy in order to not have program cancellations or the executive level talent move on to better paying jobs. Vacation days will be important for talent. Even factory workers in India have approximately 12 days of paid vacation, so we'll be looking for a minimum of 20 days. And we'll lean on the partner to determine the effective bonus rate for these different instructors, but per per payscale.com, Indian executives earn approximately $600,000 to $33,000 annually in bonuses. So these will be highly recommended for the partner. So just to recap the plan and simplify it, we're going to identify the partner, draft the licensing agreement, help the partner build a framework for success. Then we'll audit and monitor the training of the partner. And importantly, the final step here is to obtain data from the training partner on the region and its success and the profitability of the region. So thank you so much. And the next slides are just a few of my references here, and these should be available in the PowerPoint if you request it. I'd be happy to send it over. So thank you so much for this term. I really appreciated interacting with everybody in this course, and I look forward to just continuing to move forward in all of our careers. So thank you again, and let me know if you have any questions about this presentation.